Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuit Horror Reviews, and I'm here with another series ranking video because I haven't done one of these in a little bit, and I figured, hey, why the hell not? So, I'm going to cover a series with this series ranking video that I have some controversial opinions on, and yeah, uh, this is going to be a rough one. So, let's just dive right into it. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and I'm going to be talking about the original Quadrilogy. I'm not going to include the remake or anything like that. From worst to best, starting it off, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So this movie is mostly boring to me. It's got some interesting moments. I know there's a scene where like Ken Foray and Leatherface fight, and that's kind of cool. I know that like the original cut of the film was supposed to be a lot more violent, and I do know that in some of the scenes, I think for one of the trailers, legendary stuntman and the guy who's been Jason more times than anybody else, Kane Hodder, was Leatherface for some of those scenes. So you know, technically Kane Hodder has been Leatherface, Jason, and Freddy, which is kind of cool in my opinion. Other than that, fucking Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is kind of boring. There's not much going on in it. Next movie. Here's where it gets controversial. Now keep in mind, the original Quadrilogy, I don't think any of them are necessarily bad. So, don't get me wrong with this ranking. But the next one is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, my relationship with this series is kind of fucky. Just like how everybody seemed to have seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre when they were like at that right age, and it absolutely horrified them and got under their skin and just fucked with them, and it's become one of their favorite movies, and they think it's the scariest movie ever made. I had the exact opposite experience. I saw it when I was 15. I was completely disappointed by it. I hated it. I genuinely couldn't grasp why this film was so popular and why people liked it so much when I first saw it. It's grown on me a little bit since then, and it's honestly like a solid 8 out of 10 for me. Like, it's a very good movie. It's a classic for a reason. It's legendary for a reason. It is an important film to the history of the horror genre. However, I'm not a fan of it personally. It's not awful. It's a very, very good movie, but I kind of don't like I kind of just don't really like it. I think the characters are a little too goofy for me to take seriously, especially a character like Franklin, who is just like the most obnoxious comic relief character I could possibly think of. The only scenes in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I really ever remember, because the film to me is just kind of sort of forgettable in my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a classic. It's a classic. It's a really good movie for what it is. But like, I never remember anything that happens in it other than the dinner scene and when they pick up the hitchhiker. Those are the only two scenes from Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I ever remember. And the ending. Those are like the only things that I remember from that film, and everything else is just a blur to me. And you know what? I'm actually, you know what? Scratch that. I also remember the first appearance of Leatherface, which is a really great, really well done scene. It's a very shocking opener, and I think it's a really good tone setter for the rest of the film. So there, those are my thoughts on the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Next is Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. This is like the most blasphemous thing to say, but I prefer it over the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the original is this kind of, you know, so classic it's become cliche setup. It's, you know, it's backwoods horror exploitation by the numbers almost. Don't get me wrong, it was the first to do that, so therefore it deserves its cult. It deserves its status as one of the greatest horror films ever made, I believe, genuinely, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. But I kind of like the complete disregard for, like, what you expect from a exploitation horror film that you get out of the fourth entry in the series, because the fourth entry is so divorced and devoid of anything that like resembles the previous entries, to the point that it's absolutely just the most entertaining and simultaneously really, really disturbing and uncomfortable thing I've ever seen. It's an extremely uncomfortable movie, in my opinion. It feels like a combination. It feels like if Tim and Eric were handed the reins to something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, but they were told you still have to make this like legitimately disturbing, and that's what you get with the fourth film. The fourth film famously has Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey in their first roles. Matthew McConaughey is legitimately amazing in this film, and his role is horrifying. He's scarier than fucking Leatherface is in this movie. And I think that that's something else that I kind of like about the sequels in the series is that more often than not the side characters are scarier or more interesting than the almost than the most iconic character in the series of Leatherface. I really like how this film is just basically an anti Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It follows the beats of all the other movies pretty well, but does them in a way that like nobody who is a fan of this series would like or appreciate. And it's an extremely ballsy thing to do. And take into consideration the fact that the director of this film is Kim Hinkle, who co-wrote the original film, and he considers this to be the true sequel to the original. How much weirder would the original have been? How much more disturbing? How much more John Waters-esque could the original have been if Tobe Hooper didn't direct and it was just Kim Hinkle on his own directing and writing? That's what I want to know. And that's what you get with Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. My number one pick, my favorite, the one I consider to be the most interesting and entertaining Texas Chainsaw Massacre film is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I think my opinion on that film is pretty well documented on this channel, but I'll go ahead and just go over it really quickly again. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, in the way that Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation is the anti-Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is the parody Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. It follows the beats, but it is shot completely different. Its tone is entirely different. It has this weird, zany nightmare tone that feels like a combination of the original film's kind of in-your-face, gritty, almost documentary-style feel, combined with just straight-up chaotic, the most chaotic energy you can possibly fucking imagine in a film. And that's what you get with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. It is extremely chaotic, it is all over the place, it is funny, it is violent, it is extremely enjoyable, and it also features probably the greatest character in the entire series, Chop Top, who is canonically Leatherface's brother, his older brother, who is a Vietnam veteran who has a metal plate in his head, and he picks at it with a coat hanger and eats the bits of flesh off the end of the coat hanger. It's a wild, wild character, and legitimately visceral and gross and disturbing looking, even more so than Leatherface himself, in my opinion. Something for me, there's just nothing better than Chop Top and Dennis Hopper running around screaming with a fucking chainsaw. There's nothing that can match. And also the chainsaw fight at the end of the film, the almost parody of the disturbing dinner scene from the original film, because the dinner scene in the original film is legitimately disturbing, I think. It's a very powerful, very strong scene. And in the second film, it's a parody, but it's like an absolute fucking nightmare parody. It becomes just as uncomfortable and disturbing and weird and gross, just as horrific as it is in the first film. And the same thing goes for the anti-dinner scene in The Next Generation. In my opinion, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series is one of the most consistently good horror franchises out there, because there isn't an entry that I would straight up say is an awful movie. However, my opinion on all of them is very different from the average person's opinion, and I think there are plenty of people who would place the fourth film way at the bottom of their ranking and the first film way at the top, and I can understand that for obvious reasons. However, I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and I love all of the entries in the series. Even the third one, which I think is mostly just an okay movie, I genuinely have a love for, or at least a deep appreciation for. But goddamn, 1, 2, and 4, masterpieces of just absolute chaotic exploitation horror. And that's my ranking. That is the ranking video. This one was probably a pretty quick one. I hope it was a pretty quick one. But, that's it for now, guys. Anyway, this is Biscuit Boo, Horror Reviews. Signing off. Peace.